The lights of the studio flared like 1,000 flashbulbs as Jimmy Kimmel leaned into his microphone, his trademark grin flashing beneath the bright cameras. "You know," he began, voice dripping with mock seriousness, "Donald Trump just announced he's the greatest businessman in history, right after losing half his investors and accidentally buying a golf course built on a swamp." The crowd erupted. Laughter rolled through the studio like a wave. The joke wasn't new, but Jimmy's timing was flawless, the kind that made late-night television feel electric. But across the country, in Mar-a-Lago, a red light blinked on in a dark room. Trump, watching the live broadcast, froze mid-sip of Diet Coke. His jaw clenched, the smirk vanished, and the familiar storm gathered behind his eyes. "He thinks he can mock me on live television," he muttered, slamming his hand on the armrest. "We'll see about that." Kimmel, unaware of the hurricane he'd just triggered, kept going. "I mean, this guy's ego is so big, he probably sues his own reflection if it doesn't smile back." The crowd roared again. Memes were already being made, Twitter lit up with clips, hashtags, and fan edits. Hashtag Kimmel vs. Trump trended within minutes. By the time the show ended, Jimmy was basking in the afterglow of a perfect performance. What he didn't know was that, at that very same moment, Trump's legal team was already awake, phones buzzing, laptops opening, and one furious message from their boss flashing on every screen. "File the papers." He crossed the line. By sunrise, every major network had picked it up. CNN's banner flashed. "Trump files $100 million lawsuit against Jimmy Kimmel." The internet exploded. Commentators scrambled, lawyers analyzed, fans divided, some calling it the ultimate overreaction, others cheering, "Finally, Trump fights back." Overnight, Jimmy's late-night joke had transformed into a national headline. At Mar-a-Lago, Trump paced across the gold-tinted floor of his office, barking orders. "I want this everywhere. ABC, Fox, even those losers at MSNBC. They'll know you can't just laugh at me." His aides nodded nervously, pretending to type. On his desk sat the freshly printed lawsuit, 47 pages accusing Jimmy Kimmel of defamation, emotional distress, and malicious mockery. Meanwhile, over at the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio, the mood was strangely calm. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, sipping coffee, reading the news on his phone. $100 million, he said with a smirk. "That's either the price of Trump's ego, or his next golf cart." The writers burst out laughing, but deep down, Jimmy knew this was no ordinary controversy. Trump wasn't just angry, he was strategic. Within hours, Trump's legal filing dominated every news cycle. Talk shows debated freedom of speech versus personal attack. YouTubers made reaction videos. Late-night comedians posted their support for Kimmel, turning the feud into an industry-wide rebellion. In the middle of it all, Jimmy stared at the flashing camera lights again that evening and said, "Well folks, I guess I'm officially worth $100 million, at least to one very angry man." The audience roared. But behind the humor, something darker was forming, a political storm that neither man could fully control. The next night, the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio pulsed with something different, not the usual carefree laughter, but tension disguised as excitement. The audience packed in tighter than usual, the camera zoomed closer, the applause louder, as if the crowd sensed history unfolding. Jimmy walked onto the stage, his grin still intact, but his eyes held a flicker of disbelief. "So," he began, pausing just long enough for the suspense to bite, "apparently, I'm being sued for making people laugh. I didn't know comedy was a federal offense." The audience howled, but behind the jokes, Jimmy was waging a quiet war. The lawsuit wasn't just a headline, it was a warning shot from one of the most litigious men in America. In the writer's room earlier that day, his producer had asked, "Are you going to back down?" Jimmy's answer was instant: "If I back down, every comic in this country gets quieter." That's not happening. Across the country, Trump was watching again, not laughing, not blinking. His advisors whispered around him, weighing strategy over rage. "Sir, this might make him a martyr," one aide said carefully. Trump cut him off, his tone cold. He mocked me. On live TV. You let that slide, next week it's Fallon, next week it's Colbert. No, he pays. On social media, lines were drawn. Celebrities tweeted #StandWithKimmel. Right-wing pundits demanded boycotts. Clips of Jimmy's monologue flooded TikTok, each edit sharper, faster, more viral. Commenters wrote things like, "This isn't about comedy anymore. It's about control." That night, Jimmy's phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from other hosts, journalists, even politicians poured in. Some told him to lawyer up. Others told him to double down. He looked up at the ceiling lights, the same ones he'd stood under for years, and whispered to himself. Okay then, let's make this one count. The laughter that night wasn't just entertainment, it was defiance wrapped in applause. Inside Trump Tower, the night stretched long and cold. The glass walls reflected the city lights like shards of fire. At the head of a massive mahogany table sat Donald Trump, jaw tight, hands clasped, surrounded by lawyers in dark suits who looked more nervous than ready. The only sound was the faint hum of air conditioning and the clicking of Trump's gold pen against the table. "I want him humiliated," he said finally, his voice low but loaded. "Not just sued, crushed." Across the table, his lead attorney, Cynthia Marks, adjusted her glasses. She was sharp, known for turning chaos into order, but even she hesitated. "Mr. Trump, we can file for defamation and emotional distress, but suing a comedian, especially for something said on live television, won't be simple. The public might see this as..." Trump slammed the pen down. "I don't care how they see it. I built an empire on being seen. I'll build another one on being feared." The room went silent again. One younger aide broke the stillness. "Sir, what if we leverage this instead? Turn it into a campaign narrative. They mock you because they can't stop you. It could rally the base." Trump leaned back, thinking. The reflection of Manhattan's skyline flickered across his cufflinks. "No," he said finally. "He made me look weak. You fix that first. Then we talk politics." In another corner of the room, a media strategist quietly typed notes. "File early. Leak the news. Control the narrative before Kimmel does." They all knew the game wasn't about winning in court, it was about dominating headlines. Meanwhile, outside the tower, news vans lined the street. Commentators speculated non-stop. Trump hadn't just sued a comedian, he'd challenged the very idea of public mockery. Late-night TV had become the new political battlefield, and this case would be its opening shot. Trump stood, straightening his tie. Draft the press release. At 8 a.m., the world wakes up to war. The studio was quieter than usual. The audience had gathered early, but the energy in the room was uncertain, half curiosity, half concern. For years, Jimmy Kimmel Live had been the place people came to laugh before bed. But tonight, laughter felt like a risk. Jimmy stood backstage, jacket off, tie loosened, staring into the mirror. The reflection didn't smile back. "It's just jokes," he whispered, "until someone powerful decides it's not." When the lights dimmed and the band faded, he walked to the desk, slower than usual. No punchline, no cue cards, just silence. The red camera light blinked alive. "So," he began softly, "I guess I'm the first guy to be sued for sarcasm." A ripple of nervous laughter. "I joked about a man who spent half his life calling other people losers. And now, apparently, I'm $100 million threat to democracy." The crowd began to warm, clapping cautiously. Jimmy's eyes hardened. "But here's the thing," he continued, leaning forward, voice lower, sharper. "This isn't about me. This is about what happens when a joke, a harmless, late-night joke, scares someone in power so much, they try to turn laughter into liability." Behind the camera glass, producers stood frozen. They hadn't approved this speech. They didn't need to, it was happening live. "I grew up believing humor was how we survived the madness," Jimmy said. "But when humor gets punished, that's not democracy anymore. That's fear with a lawyer." The room erupted, cheers, whistles, shouts of "We love you, Jimmy." He smiled, finally, but it wasn't victory. It was resolve. If this is the price of a joke, he finished, then I'm paying it, with interest. The feed cut to commercial, but the internet had already captured it. Within minutes, the clip flooded every platform. Headlines screamed, "Kimmel fires back," and the crowd loses it. At 3:47 a.m., an encrypted email hit 3 inboxes: CNN, The New York Times, and a political blog known for leaking government files. Subject line: Trump vs. Kimmel, internal memos. Within minutes, the story exploded online. Someone inside Trump's legal team had leaked the entire lawsuit draft, complete with strategy notes and personal comments. One line, scribbled in red ink, read, "Keep him talking, the more he jokes, the easier it is to frame him as disrespectful to the presidency." By dawn, hashtags like #ComedyOnTrial and #TrumpLeaks dominated Twitter. News anchors scrambled to verify the documents, but the damage was done. The public didn't need proof, they needed a villain. And this time, the narrative had flipped. Inside Mar-a-Lago, chaos brewed. Trump stormed into the conference room, holding a printed copy of the leak. "Find out who did this," he bellowed. His attorney Cynthia tried to steady him. "We're containing it, sir, but..." "No buts," he snapped. "I look like an idiot. The world thinks I'm afraid of a clown in a suit." Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Jimmy Kimmel was sitting in a dimly lit dressing room, scrolling through the leaked files. He wasn't smiling this time. "They planned this," he murmured. His producer, Lisa, hovered behind him. "They wanted you to react, to lose control." Jimmy nodded slowly. "Then we do the opposite. We stay calm. We stay funny. That's what they can't stand." That night, Kimmel opened his show with a smirk and a copy of the leaked memo in hand. "Apparently," he said, "I'm part of a government-level operation, and I didn't even get a badge." The crowd erupted. The joke landed, but beneath it, something profound stirred: humor as rebellion, truth wrapped in punchlines. By midnight, the clip hit 10 million views. For the first time, it wasn't Trump controlling the story, it was Jimmy. And somewhere, deep in the legal corridors of Washington, a whisper began to spread: maybe the joke's on him this time. By the end of the week, America wasn't laughing at Jimmy Kimmel, it was laughing with him. The leaked memo had turned the tide completely. Talk shows, podcasts, and even conservative radio hosts were now asking the same question: if Trump can't handle a joke, how can he handle power? Across the country, street murals appeared overnight, Kimmel's silhouette holding a microphone like a torch, beneath it the words, "Humor is freedom." The movement wasn't planned, it was spontaneous, viral, unstoppable. What started as one man's lawsuit had become a cultural referendum. Inside the White House, advisors whispered nervously. Aides reported plummeting favorability numbers, especially among younger voters. One analyst put it bluntly, "Mr. Trump, the internet thinks you're the villain in a comedy." He slammed his fist on the table. Then maybe it's time they remembered who built the stage. Meanwhile, Jimmy sat in his office surrounded by fan letters and memes of his now iconic smirk from the badge joke episode. For the first time, he felt the weight of something bigger than entertainment. "I didn't mean to start a war," he said quietly. His producer Lisa smiled. "Wars don't start with weapons anymore, Jimmy. They start with words. You just made them count." That night, the show's monologue wasn't written by the team, it was written by the moment. Jimmy looked into the camera, voice calm but fierce. "They say comedy should stay out of politics. But when politics starts suing punchlines, that's not politics anymore. That's insecurity in a red tie." The audience rose to their feet. Standing ovation. No applause sign needed. Across the city, phones lit up, tweets, posts, reactions pouring in like a digital wave. #KimmelStrikesBack hit #1 trending worldwide. In one penthouse office high above Fifth Avenue, Trump watched in silence, eyes cold, the glow of the TV flickering across his face. For the first time in years, the laughter wasn't his to command. In the days after Kimmel's monologue broke the internet, Trump's team retreated underground, not defeated, but reloading. Inside a private media suite in Florida, walls lined with glowing monitors, a new kind of war room came to life. No flags, no podiums, just screens, coffee cups, and silence. At the center sat Trump, scrolling through clips of Kimmel's speech on loop. Every smirk, every cheer, every word that made the crowd roar, he studied them like evidence. "Fine," he said finally, voice slow, deliberate. "He wants a show. Let's give him one." Cynthia Marks, his lawyer, frowned. "Sir, the public is siding with him. Another attack might." Trump cut her off with a glare. "Not attack. Strategy." He turned toward a young digital operative. "Start a campaign. Push stories questioning his Hollywood hypocrisy. Find old clips. Dig up the dirt. Make them wonder if he's as clean as he looks." By sunrise, hashtags began to shift. Hashtag Kimmelgate trended in conservative circles. Anonymous accounts leaked exclusive footage of Jimmy at charity galas, twisting his jokes into moral scandals. Commentators framed him as elitist, ungrateful, a fake everyman. It was dirty, but effective. Meanwhile, Jimmy's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. "They're coming hard," Lisa warned. "Fox is calling you the left's court jester." Jimmy sighed, staring out the window. "Good," he said. "That means they're scared." But deep down, he knew the storm was only beginning. Trump's empire wasn't built on truth, it was built on attention. And this new offensive wasn't about winning the lawsuit anymore. It was about rewriting the narrative before America decided who the real fool was. By the end of the week, one thing was clear: the late-night joke had turned into a full-scale media war. And both men knew, whoever lost control of the story next, would lose everything. The storm Trump unleashed turned on him faster than anyone expected. What began as a smear campaign started cracking under its own weight. One of the anonymous sources leaking against Kimmel turned out to be a contractor tied directly to Trump's media pack. The discovery hit Reuters at dawn, and within hours the words, "coordinated misinformation campaign," were everywhere. Cable networks ran the footage of Trump's operatives entering side doors of a Florida media firm. The same firm that had quietly uploaded thousands of fake posts under burner accounts. When confronted, the young digital strategist, the one Trump had barked orders at days earlier, turned whistleblower. "He told us to make Kimmel look dirty," she confessed on live TV, her voice trembling. It wasn't about truth. It was about control. Trump's team scrambled. Cynthia Marks fielded frantic calls from reporters as sponsors and donors began to vanish overnight. "We can fix this," she pleaded. Trump slammed his fist on the table. "We don't fix, we fight." But the echo of his words felt weaker now. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel walked onto his set that night with quiet confidence. He didn't gloat. He didn't mock. Instead, he held up a newspaper headline, "Comedy Fights Back." The audience roared, but he just smiled faintly. "I guess the joke wasn't on me after all." Across the nation, something shifted. Pundits who once mocked Kimmel now praised his restraint. Hashtags that once tore him down now celebrated him, hashtag stand up for laughs, hashtag truth in jest. Even late-night rivals applauded on air. For the first time, humor wasn't just entertainment, it was resistance. In the White House suite, Trump watched the coverage unfold, face pale, jaw set. The laughter he'd once commanded was echoing back at him, not cruelly, but with a quiet, unstoppable truth: his power to define the story was gone. And for the first time in his life, the silence around him felt louder than the applause ever had. The lawsuit was never formally withdrawn, it simply faded. Like a storm that had burned through everything, leaving silence behind. Weeks later, the media cycle had moved on, but the echo of the feud lingered everywhere, in think pieces, comedy clubs, and classrooms debating what it all meant. Jimmy Kimmel stood on the rooftop of his studio one quiet evening, coffee in hand, looking out over Los Angeles. The city buzzed below, indifferent and alive. Lisa joined him, arms crossed. "You realize you changed something, right?" she said. He smiled faintly. "Nah. I just told a joke." She laughed. "Yeah. But this time, the joke told the truth." Across the country, Trump sat alone in his Florida estate, TV muted, scrolling through headlines that once glorified him. The lawsuit had backfired spectacularly. Sponsors gone. Donors cautious. Even his closest allies kept their distance. But the worst part wasn't the backlash, it was the quiet. For a man who'd lived off noise, silence felt like exile. A news segment flickered on the screen, Kimmel honored for defending free expression. Trump stared for a long time, then turned off the TV. In the reflection of the blank screen, he saw something he hadn't faced in years, himself, without applause. Meanwhile, Jimmy's show aired its final segment of the week. No fireworks, no mockery. Just him, looking straight into the camera. "They say laughter is harmless," he said softly. "But maybe that's what makes it dangerous, because it reminds people they still have power." The audience stayed quiet, listening. Then the applause rose, not wild, but warm, the sound of people understanding. Outside, a fan held a sign under the studio lights. "You can silence a mic, but not the message." And somewhere, in that fragile space between politics and humanity, a line had been drawn, not in anger, but in clarity. A reminder that sometimes, the loudest truth, is the one that makes people laugh. Power doesn't always shout, sometimes, it laughs back. If you believe truth can still be told with a smile, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we expose them.